We are finally here, the 1-year anniversary of Sideline Sports Podcast. I'm the host, Alex Naveja, where if you're not on Sideline, it's not Sideline Sports Podcast, the source of all of your SoCal sports news. And with me today is a very special guest. It is the Spanish voice of the Los Angeles Dodgers, Jorge JARRIN. For those of you guys that don't know, his father is also the Spanish voice of the Dodgers, and JAIME JARRIN. But before we introduce him into the show, I just want to say thank you so much to everybody that has supported to the podcast and who has absolutely supported me every step of the way. We greatly appreciate it. Here's to many more, folks, and we're going to bring you big guests. And without further ado, Jorge, how you doing? It is an absolute pleasure to have you on the show.
Alex, listen, the pleasure is all mine. Congratulations on your tenacity, your perseverance, completing a 1-year anniversary on this podcast at a time that nowadays it seems like everybody has a podcast going. But good for you. I applaud you. Te felicito por el éxito de tu podcast. Estás pasando por un buen camino. Sigue adelante. And I'm just happy to be here. I'm flattered that you asked me to be your guest on this 1-year anniversary. First time you've done a Zoom podcast as well. So we'll see how it goes. I hope not to let you all down.
Well, I can tell you right now, I know a ton of people out there are already surprised from it as well. I did not tell anybody. There's maybe only one or two, but that's family members. I didn't even tell any of my close friends that you're coming onto the show, Jorge. So a lot of people are like, whoa, it's Jorge JARRIN. So everyone's going to be excited right now that you're actually on the show. So, and I'm sure people are like, whoa, he speaks English. So yeah people are going to be mind blown from it. But you know what, Jorge? Let's get started. Yeah. I know a lot of people want to know a little bit about you. So I just want to start, when you're a little kid, your father, the big legend that he is in sports broadcasting and in the Spanish voice, what was your childhood like? Just, knowing that your dad was a broadcaster, and what was your childhood like?
Well, I know that prior to coming on, we talked a little bit about this podcast, some of the areas you were going to cover. You said that you wanted to ask me about that first time as a little kid that I went to Dodger Stadium. And Alex, you'll be probably surprised to know that my memories take me back even further. I actually took in my very first Dodger game as a very little boy, about 4 years old, at the Los Angeles Memorial Coliseum, when my father first started with the Dodgers back in 1959. And I was just a little runt of about 4 years old. And I clearly do remember that back behind the home plate section at the Coliseum, they had made a makeshift press box, up on scaffolding. They had created this press box that wasn't too high up, unlike the press box that you find now at the Memorial Coliseum for football and other sporting events, the Olympics and such, which are way up there, and the angle wasn't right for baseball. So they had to build a makeshift temporary press box behind home plate. And I remember laying on my stomach on the floor because I was 4 years old. I wasn't even into the baseball. I didn't even understand what baseball really was. All I know is that particular day, my dad had taken me to work with him. My mom was there. And for a little bit, I was out behind the press box in the aisle on my stomach with a little car going back and forth, just zoom, zoom, zoom. And all of a sudden, I see two big black cleated shoes right in front of me. Somebody stepping over. And I looked up and I saw what to me looked like the Jolly Green Giant at the time, a guy who was over 6 feet tall. He happened to be a Dodger player who was coming up to the press box for a pregame interview in his full uniform, and it was Wally Moon, the man who made the moonshot famous at the Memorial Coliseum because of that very short left field fence. They had to put up that tall screen because at that time, left field was only 200 feet away from home plate. Wow. So in order to kind of even things out, they put up this tremendous screen, and Wally Moon was a batter who had the ability to hit to was a right-handed batter who hit to the left field over that and created what was called the moonshot. That's my very first recollection. Off and on, growing up, I grew up here in Los Angeles. I came to this country in 1955. My parents brought me here. We're immigrants from Quito, Ecuador. And my father had never, ever seen a baseball game until he arrived in the United States. And it was kind of pathetic that he was walking down the street one day in Alhambra, California, and he was walking past a storefront window of a furniture store. And back in those days, it was quite common to see color televisions. You know, people were just now, color television was coming in the late 50s, early 60s. So you would see TV sets and sofas and anything that represented a living room set up in a storefront window. And they would turn the TVs on, and a lot of people at times waiting for the bus, waiting for a taxi, walking down the street, they would stop in front and check out whatever was on the television set. My father saw this huge crowd of people standing around this storefront window watching a TV set. This was 1955. This was the World Series between then the New York Yankees and the Brooklyn Dodgers. And that's when he first saw this game and said, oh my God, what is this attraction to this game? Because growing up, my father was a fan of soccer and boxing. That was it in Ecuador. That was basically it. That was the major sport, was soccer. So now he's in this country. He had been seeking a career in broadcasting. He was more of a newsman, a journalist. And he then had been applying for positions and knocking on doors, and finally got his big break at KWKW, the only Spanish language radio station at that time in Los Angeles. And then 2 years later, the Dodgers coming to Los Angeles, and I remember that my father telling us about how the president of the radio station had gathered all his employees to celebrate. They brought out champagne. We're going to carry the Dodger games in Spanish starting next year. And he said, I need 2 announcers. And I says, we already have 1 announcer, but he looked around and says, Jaime, I think you should be the other broadcaster. My father said, I don't know anything about baseball. And he said, you know, I still think you have a good quality, a good voice. I think you would do this to the best of your ability, and you would do a great job. And my father was just not convinced. And he said, I'll tell you what I'm going to do. I'm going to let you take a year to get ready. Go to games, go to the Gilmore Field, go to the old Wrigley Field down in South Central Los Angeles on 42nd and Avalon. Go to these ballparks, catch the minor league games, study up on the game as much as you can. And my father felt he had no choice. Here's an opportunity. He still was a newsman by day as the news director, doing every hour news on the hour, plus reports from the field, from other areas. But he started looking into and spending his time off, going to ball games and things. And then in 1959, he got his first start doing just 1 inning. And then that grew and grew. And before you know it, you know, he became a regular where that was his main job as the Spanish voice. He and Rene Cardenas, later he had a number of different partners that came in and went, but my dad always stuck to the Dodgers, always stayed true to KWKW. Now, and most people know, but if you haven't heard, my father, who never had seen a Spanish or had never seen a baseball game, was inducted into the Baseball Hall of Fame in Cooperstown, New York in 1998, is now celebrating his 62nd year as the longest tenured announcer in all of baseball, both English and in Spanish, and right up there in sports with 62 years. But going back to your original question, now you have the background. That's my dad. I grew up in Los Angeles. We moved then later up to Altadena. We lived there closer to the radio station. To me, it wasn't anything out of the ordinary. My father was gone most of the time. So I give a lot of credit to my mom, who really made us feel like we weren't missing out on anything. She made us always feel like we were part of, you know, this. My father had a very important job to do that required a lot of time, because when he started traveling with the team back in 1964-65 season, that's when he was gone. During the week, he'd be gone on the road, then he'd come home, but he'd be at the ballpark every night, and he was still handling his duties as the news director at the radio station. So he was gone quite a bit of the time. But then in 1966, that's when I really started taking a strong interest in baseball because I joined Little League. I started playing Little League baseball and when we had moved to San Marino. And, you know, the funny thing was by then my friends started asking me more and more about hey, I heard your dad is a broadcaster for the Dodgers. Do you know Don Drysdale? Do you know Sandy Koufax? Do you know John Roseborough? And like a little kid wanting to impress their friends, I'd say, oh, absolutely. I know these guys. They come over to my house all the time. They go, they do? Oh, yeah. Sandy Koufax has come over for dinner. Don Drysdale's a good friend. We went on a vacation. Ron Peronoski. Most of this stuff was greatly exaggerated on my part. Sandy Koufax never came for dinner. Don Drysdale never came over and hung out with my parents or anything at all like that. But you know, I just was at that point so aware of what my father did that I embellished upon that. And of course, my friends would get a big kick out of it. And they'd always ask me, well, when can we come over and get an autograph? When can we see them? I said, well, you never know. I got to check and I'll get back to you. But, you know, that's when I started going more and more to Dodger games, was at Dodger Stadium. I still remember my father taking me to Chavez Ravine when they were just building the stadium. It wasn't a stadium yet. It was a big hole in the ground. And I remember standing way up on the side of the hill, looking down with my dad as I saw all the tractor trailers and the graders and the bulldozers going back and forth and moving earth. And I asked my dad, Dad, what's going on here? What is this? And he said, this is going to be our future home. Well, what he meant was the future home of the Dodgers. Using the term we as in the team and the organization. But to me, at that time, I took it to mean, are we building this huge house? Is this where we're going to live? No. This is the new stadium. This is going to be a new stadium. And in 1962, you know, they inaugurated Dodger Stadium. I started going there regularly in 66. My dad would say, Sundays were the days that I got to go to the ballpark with my dad. So Sunday, I would have a Little League game in the morning, Saturdays and Sundays, have a morning game, and then in the afternoon, my dad would leave by about 11 o'clock in the morning. Sometimes I'd have to ask him and be out of there before the seventh inning came because that's when Little League games ended. You know, it was just 7 innings. I'd play 5 innings and I got to go. I'm going to the Dodger game today. And I'd usually take a friend or two. And my dad would take us to the very top of the park. And he would let us in. He'd tell the ushers, hey, this is my son. Keep an eye on him. I'll be back when the game is over to pick him up. So we were just given free reign to run around and watch the games. And those were the days of the Giants and the Dodger rivalry with Juan Marichal and Willie Mays and Orlando Cepeda. And I got to watch all those guys play, as well as the Dodger greats, Sandy Koufax and Don Drysdale, Duke Snider. I mean, so I had the good fortune, at least from my own perspective, to start building my own connection to that team. Later on, when I was in high school, during the summer, I'd work as an usher at Dodger Stadium. I was one of those guys that walked around with a funny straw hat and mustard stain on his tie and the short white sleeve shirt and walked around and showed people to their seats. And I was a Dodger usher. So I got to watch a lot of baseball games in the early 70s working there. And I worked there off and on in the summer times. My brother sold programs. So we had an opportunity to, you know, get involved as much as we possibly could. I even met my wife there. That's where I met her when I was an usher, and she came to a game, and she was in high school at that time. And I just saw this young lady sitting in section 9, and I was supposed to be working in section 11. And I kept hanging out over by section 9, checking her out. And her sister, her older sister, just to give her a hard time, she said, hey, that guy, he keeps staring at you. And I know him because her sister knew some friends there, and she would come quite a bit, her sister Diane. She goes, he's supposed to be working usually over at section 11. So then I was coming by and standing by them and smiling. And then all of a sudden her sister Diane just jumped up and said, excuse me, would you like to meet my sister? And I thought, wow, she put her up to it. And I said, yeah, absolutely. And Maggie, my wife, Maggie, was mortified. I mean, just couldn't believe that her sister had done that to her. And the thing is, I said, well, listen, where do you live? And she goes, well, I live in Alhambra. I go, hey, we're practically neighbors. How about if we get together for lunch sometime? Because I figured lunch is a nice, safe type of date. It wasn't coming on too hard, not too much. And she said, well, I don't know. And she thought about it for a while. Then she gave me her phone number. And as they say, the rest is history. We got married in 1981, and we've been married ever since. We have 3 boys, and my wife is a huge Dodger fan. She loves baseball. Her dad was a player also who played in the Mexican leagues for a little while. And so baseball was something that her family was very much into. My family, of course. So it's a match made in heaven. What can I tell you? Baseball heaven, Dodger blue heaven. So that's the basis, and that's the origin of my love affair with baseball. Aside from the fact that my dad, it was his life as well. So growing up around it was something that I was very accustomed to from the very beginning.
So I'll tell you one thing, Jorge. If I was like one of those little kids where I'm asking you, oh, hey, so you must see Sandy Koufax and Don Drysdale and such, and you say, oh, yeah, I would have so believed you right then and there. I would have said, oh, what, you really had them for dinner, just coming in, hey, I'm here for some dinner.
Yeah.
I'm here for some dinner, I'm here to see and just, talk to you guys. I would have believed that. I would have been those little kids like, oh, wow, look.
Oh, absolutely.
I would have been those little kids. But, you were talking about playing little leagues and such. I just want to ask this real briefly. How far did you get in the playing career aspect?
Oh, no. I was just a, kid ball player, Sandlot, little league. My freshman year in high school. After that, I didn't really, I wasn't blessed with the baseball genes that my younger son, who was actually grew up playing baseball and was drafted by the Dodgers, then spent 2 years in the minor leagues, then was traded to the Phillies. And, when we get together and we talk, and sometimes it's funny, every once in a while, I've told my son, hey, come on, let's have a game of catch. I go, okay, all right, we'll go out in the backyard and we start throwing the ball and we're talking. I said, no, but come on, but really, give me a good throw. Give me a fastball. I go, no, Dad, I don't. No. I said, no, come on, Steph. He goes, no, Dad, really, I'm only going to keep it at about, 60%. We're just playing catch. I said, come on, I really want to see your hardest throw and everything. And because he was a middle infielder. And he said, Dad, I don't want to hurt you. You're going to get hurt. And, well, I said, no, I'm okay. I can handle myself. Man, he let one go. And I tell you what, I didn't feel right here, this part of my hand, it went numb for like 3 to 4 days. Oh, you palmed it. Oh, yeah. I caught it right there and boom. But, and of course, as Dad, I didn't want to flinch. I didn't want, no.
I got it. I got it,
I got it. But he knew, he said, and the fact is that we all love playing the game and everything, but there comes a tipping point where you see those who really can't keep up as you get older and you physically have more of an impact on the game itself. It's like playing. I remember when I went to college at Pepperdine University, and I remember a couple of weekends getting together with some friends over at UCLA and playing pickup flag football, man. And there came a point by the time I was about 22 years old, I said, I'm just going to get hurt out here, man. I don't have the size. I don't have the speed. And generally these guys that were playing at that time, these are guys who they had talent and ability, but not quite good enough to make it onto a college football team, for example. I played a lot of football. I played all 4 years in high school. I played football. I was in track. I ran quite a bit. I even swam competitively for a while just to try different things as well, and wrestling. But my son was really the athlete, has always been the athlete in the family. And I marvel at that because there comes a point really where the really good, serious athletes are separated from the weekend warriors. And so my interest then became really more and more observational. My oldest son is the same way. He's not gifted as an athlete, but my gosh, he knows everything there is. He just loves and consumes baseball more than my younger son. Whereas my younger son, who played, he still loves watching and dissecting and breaking down the game. And we had a lively discussion the other day about the Fernando Tatis Grand Slam and the unwritten rules and everything. Okay. And Steph really broke it down really well for me so that I could understand where he was coming from, because he was in favor of Fernando Tatis. Just let the guy go. Let him do what he does. And I'm trying to explain, yeah, but you know what? The manager had given him a sign, and now we don't know whether he missed the sign or, as he said, I was locked in and it didn't register. I just saw a pitch. It was 3-0 and boom, I went for it. And as my son pointed out, pitchers aren't going to lay off. They're not going to say, hey, we're winning by 7 runs or 8 runs, so I'm going to lay off and not strike out this guy. They're not going to do that. Why should the batter do the same? Why should that be the expectation offensively on the batter as well? So, exactly. We had a nice discussion and everything, but my son, as I said, my original point was that Andrew just devours the game. He's more of the baseball fan now in the family, and has been for quite some time, than my youngest son, who actually played. My youngest son has become just crazy about soccer. He's a huge LAFC fan, and he also is a big Man U. He also follows Ecuadorian soccer because the reason he does that, and I'll tell you just real quickly, because I know I'm all over the place, but I've got so many stories. My son, in growing up, he was in high school, he was a big fish in a little pond. He was an all-league, #1 team, Mission League, a second baseman, everything. So after he graduated, he wasn't scouted out of high school. He was very good, but he wasn't scouted out of high school. So he wanted to go to a junior college that had a really good program, Orange Coast College. But prior to that, we talked to Ned Coletti, and we had an idea. I said, Ned, I asked my dad to ask Ned, is there any chance, would it be all right if Steph went to the Dominican Republic and spent a summer there playing in the Dominican Summer League and training and living at Campo Las Palmas and really soaking in that environment? I really wanted him to get a firsthand look of what it's like, not only just here in the United States, but when you have the young, talented, aggressive, hungry Latino ball players. And why has the Dominican Republic produced so many great ball players? Because I wanted him to understand their perspective. And I thought this would be great in preparation to going to college. And so Ned said, I think it's a great idea. I will let him live, train, work out, be at the complex. The only thing he can't do is actually participate in games against other teams because he is not a signed ball player as of yet. But let's see if it works out in that direction. So that was a wonderful, wonderful experience for him. He was given the option because they said, listen, you can live in this. We have next to the director of the complex. There's a guest room with air conditioning, very comfortable, or you can live in the dormitory with the other players. And my son said, to his credit, no, I came here for the full experience. I want to live in the dormitory. I want to work with the guys. I want to be with them 24/7. And he was. And it gave him such an appreciation for all of that. And then fast forward, he gets drafted after playing 2 years at Orange Coast College. Then he gets drafted. He gets into baseball. He has a career in the minor leagues. It comes to an end. And then after he was released by the Phillies, he got a call from the Ecuadorian national baseball team. Now, baseball is a developing game and a developing sport in Ecuador. The sports ministry there wants to develop more and more baseball players, just like what they've seen in Colombia, Venezuela, and Cuba, and the Dominican Republic, Puerto Rico. So they asked him, said, Steph, listen, you just got released. You are, he said, well, I'm not an Ecuadorian citizen. I'm not a national. I was born in the United States. He says, yeah, but your father your father is an Ecuadorian citizen. Me, he says, and so therefore you are eligible to be a part of this team. We have a qualifying tournament coming up in Chile for the Pan American Games, and we'd like for you to be a part of the Ecuadorian national team. So he did. It was a great opportunity. He laughed a lot also when one of the things he told me about when they were playing in Chile, they had to play Brazil one day in this tournament, and the Brazilian team bus pulled up to the complex, and as he saw the players getting off, he was amazed. He goes, "Wait a minute, are we playing Brazil or are we playing Japan?" Because every player on the Brazilian team was Japanese coming off. Yeah, every player was Japanese. Well, the Brazilians had done the very same thing that the Ecuadorians had done. They had an American player who was technically Ecuadorian because of his parents. Well, in Brazil, there are a number of Japanese families, workers that have migrated to Brazil. They took with them their love of the game baseball, just like in other parts of the United States to other countries, they've taken the game. So he said, "Oh my God, we had all these Japanese players, and they were a very, very good team." He said they were tough, very tough. But he says, at first I was amazed to see how many Japanese players on the Brazilian team. So it's because of that association, having represented Ecuador. My son just follows Ecuadorian sports, and he will get up at 3 o'clock in the morning just to watch a match that's taking place with a couple of great Ecuadorian players playing in the European League. So sports is a huge thing in our family.
Definitely. I couldn't tell at all. There was a little sarcasm in there. But so let's go ahead and take a quick break, Jorge. When we come back, we're going to start talking a little bit about those broadcasting roots and how broadcasting came about on your career. And please tell all of the fans that when we come back from the break. But if you're not on the sideline, it's not Sideline Sports Podcast, the source of all your SoCal sports. We'll be right back.
Hi, my name's Stephen Leonardi. I'm the commissioner of the Major League Baseball Fan Association, and you are watching the Sideline Sports Podcast.
Welcome back to Sideline Sports Podcast. Again, I'm the host, Alex Naveja, where if you're not on the sideline, it's not Sideline Sports Podcast, the source of all SoCal sports. And again, with me is the Spanish voice of the Los Angeles Dodgers, Jorge Jarrin, the son of Hall of Fame broadcaster Jaime Jarrin. And first half, we're talking about his childhood and just talking about how baseball became his life and just jumped into his life and just what the childhood was like with going into the Dodger Stadium, working as an usher at Dodger Stadium and being there with his dad and even seeing the construction of Dodger Stadium. But now, the moment that you all have been waiting for is how did broadcasting come into Jorge's life and what that was like? So Jorge, without further ado, you could go ahead and take the mic. And how did it jump on? When did your dad finally say, "Jorge, I need you up here in the press box. It's time to hand the mic off over to you and continue that broadcasting blood. You're a Jarrin. It's time to hand it off over to you."
Oh, well, listen, Alex, you set that up so well. The thing is, though, my career and how it began and how it's evolved in broadcasting, to be honest with you, I never really envisioned myself in a broadcasting career, only because since I had been around it so much, because I used to go to the radio stations when my dad was putting together shows and stuff and wander around the radio station and look at things and stand behind the engineer at the console. So, you know, it's something that I was around and very familiar. So when I went off to college, it wasn't like I set out to be a broadcaster per se. I wasn't really quite sure as what happens in the course of your college career is that you change your mind so many times. At first, I thought I was going to major in psychology. Later on, I always had the gift of gab. That's one of the things that I think was passed down from my family, being bilingual as well, being very verbal, expressing ourselves. So I always had that gift of gab. And I went to Pepperdine University. I was offered a scholarship there in their theater arts department as a performing major. And, you know, I really thought for a while I was going to try and have the career in front of a camera doing, you know, acting and such. At that time, this was back in the mid 70s, you know, Al Pacino was really big. And I said, oh, Al Pacino's only 5'8". Dustin Hoffman, 5'7". Hey, I'm 5'8". You know, it's not holding them back. I don't have to be this tall, dark, and handsome guy. I mean, I think I could carve out a career in movies and in television. And that's really where I was focusing. But the fact of the matter is, I grew tired of just going on casting calls and things it was always about, well, you're playing this young Chicano street guy and everything. And I'm like, really? I mean, there's more to life than just that. And I didn't have the patience to stick with that because I didn't like what I was being offered. And I kept looking and searching, what else can I do? And one of the things that I happened to come across at that time was a class that I took in college that was instructed by the general sales manager of KLOS Radio. And I really started to think about a sales career, a career in the broadcasting field, but really in the area of sales. And I knew that I could show my passion and my interest in a product that I could offer to others as an opportunity to get in and how that could help you and help your company and everything. So I thought sales. So when I graduated, I had a couple of intern jobs in the sales department, one at KABC television. And then I happened to be visiting some friends at NBC, and I got a job. I was offered a job as a page at NBC, which entailed giving tours and talking about the productions that were going. Now, the thing is, if you know anything about the television industry, the studios are dark, meaning there's nothing going on during the day, during the earlier part of the day. However, by 3 p.m, they start all their production work. The Tonight Show, Wheel of Fortune, the Days of Our Lives. I mean, all this stuff was going on at the NBC studios. And you would have all these tourists that would come, and I would have to give a 1-hour walking tour explaining the shows and how they put together shows at NBC. And the thing is, the challenge was after 3 o'clock, you would have tour groups that had been waiting there a couple of hours, and now you've got really nothing to show them because the big doors to the studios would be closed. You couldn't go inside. So I learned to really think on my feet, describing what was going on behind those doors to the point that it would make it interesting enough for those people that they feel like, well, you know what? I got my money's worth. I got to see this and that and stuff. And he told us what was going on. If we could go in there, this is what you would see. So that kind of gave me some training and everything. I left NBC for a job in production for a production company. Great experience. But when you work in production, you don't know if your show doesn't get picked up, you're going to be out of a job. And I worked for a couple of years for a company called Hill Eubanks, and we produced a show called You Bet Your Life, which was a remake of the old Groucho Marx game show with Buddy Hackett. And I also worked with the Captain and Tennille, at that time a very popular singing group, and they had their own talk show in the afternoons at NBC. Those shows, though, were eventually canceled, and I found myself out of a job. And I had just gotten married. Literally, I had got married in 1981, and 6 months later, I was out of a job. So I thought, you know, I got to do something. I know where I want to keep staying. I want to stay in the entertainment industry. I want to stay somewhere so related to that. But until something opens up, I got to figure out, I got to go do something else that'll bring in money. You know what I ended up doing? I sold cars. I went to work for a car dealership.
Okay.
And I worked for a dealership because I saw an ad in the paper that they were looking for car salesmen, no prior experience, and they were willing to pay $1,500 a month for the first month of training. And I said, hey, that's better than unemployment. remember, for any broadcast manager, whatever, there are times you might have to put your plans on hold off to one side because of the necessities of life. Means that you just got to grab a job and keep the income coming in while you still continue to pursue your career. Well, I did very, very well selling cars. And that ended up taking almost a year of my time because I was moved from a salesman to a sales manager. Then they promoted me to the finance and insurance manager. You know, the guy that you come in to see after you've bought your car and they printing out all the contracts, and he's the guy that wants to sell you on the extended warranty and the clear coat and all this stuff, that's what I was doing. But it gave me an opportunity to really improve my communication skills, my ability to sell myself, sell a product or whatever. This was all turned out to be very important. And I remember reading the Los Angeles Olympics were coming to Los Angeles. This was now 1982. And I said, there's got to be an opportunity there. I'm bilingual. I could go work for the Olympic Organizing Committee. Well, they tried to talk me out of that. I remember the general manager of the dealership saying, you know what? You've got a great career in the auto industry. I don't think you should make this move. And I told him, I'm looking to leave soon, and I just wanted to give you a heads up. He goes, no. You've got a bright future. And I kept thinking, my bright future will mean working weekends until 9 or 10 o'clock at night selling cars. Sorry, it's a fine profession, but it's not where my heart is. I have to follow my passion. So I ended up getting a call. I sent in a resume. I wrote a letter to the organizing committee. They called me right away. I went to work for the Los Angeles Olympic Organizing Committee in 1983 as a member of the public relations staff, which meant that my job was to go around the communities and make the communities know and understand how the games were going to impact that community. And then the feedback from the community, I would take it back to the organizing committee to bring up the problems, the challenges, and what we needed to do. In short, the Olympics in 1984 were an astounding success, a never before amount of money, a profit that was made by the Los Angeles Olympics. So then after the games were over, I was kept on for a few more months going around talking about the success of the games and what was going to happen with all the revenue, and talk about the new Amateur Athletic Foundation, which later became LA 84 Foundation. And I was on a radio show called Sports Talk at Dodger Stadium, of all places. And I was interviewed by Tommy Hawkins and Bud Ferrillo, who were the hosts of that show. We talked for about 20 minutes, just like we're talking here. And while I was on the air, the general manager at KABC heard the interview as he was on his way to a Dodger game, and he was stuck in traffic on the Santa Monica Freeway. So because it took him so long to get to the stadium, he listened to the entire interview and liked it so much. And for whatever reason, he just felt that I could he just liked the way I came off during the interview on the air. And he tracked me down. I had left the stadium by then, but he went to see my father, who he had never really met. And he said, listen, I need to talk to you for a moment. I'm the president general manager at KBC Radio. And I believe your son is Jorge your son? Yeah, that's my son. Yeah, he was here earlier today. Yes, I heard him on an interview during Sports Talk. And I would like to talk to him some more. I have some ideas. I'd like to utilize him and maybe be interested in working for us. And so, my dad calls me afterwards, after the game is over. He says, listen, here's a number. You need to call this man. He wants to see you. You did some kind of an interview, and he was pretty impressed. And I said, really? I said, this is crazy. So I called George Green the next day, and he took my call, 9 o'clock. He took my call right away. And then he said, wait, hold on. Because George was a very excitable guy. He says, don't go away. I'm going to go find my program director, and I'm going to go get him. I want him to hear you. So about 3-4 minutes on hold, then he comes back. And he has his program director on the other line. His name is Wally Sherwin. Now, this is probably, you might not remember who Wally Sherwin is, but there are people who might, listening to your podcast, some of their parents, whatever. Wally Jarrinn was this guy with all white hair, little white mustache, who was famous at that time for doing the plumbing commercials called AD-Do. He was Mr. AD-Do, but he was also the program director at KABC. And George put me on and he said, okay, go ahead, talk. And I was like, what? Just talk. I want Wally. And Wally said, George, calm down. You know what? Jorge, why don't you come on in and let's have an interview and we'll talk a little bit. So I did, and I found out that what was going on is at that moment, they were looking for someone to fill this role of an airborne traffic reporter. Someone who, and you have to remember, KABC was the first talk radio station in the country. And so they were very personality driven. Their shows in the morning show, they had a show called the Ken and Bob Company. KABC stood for the Ken and Bob Company. And they had a morning show with Stu Nahan and C.G. Ware and Barbara Essenston, the contributors and everything, different aspects, story. So it was a very personality-driven show. So he said, look, we're looking for a guy who has personality, who can jump in there, now not just give us the traffic reports, but has the opportunity to be up in the air when things happen and talk about this, and he can be our eyes and ears out there. So this is really an important role. The last person who had filled this role years before was a gal named Kelly. Oh gosh, now I'm going to blank out on her name. Kelly. She became the news anchor at KNBC, but at that time they had this. Oh gosh, what was Kelly's last name? It's going to kill me. Some people are probably yelling out right now, "Hey, you idiot! It's Kelly so-and-so from KNBC from the old days." But this position had led to her career as a news anchor, and I thought, hey, this could be a great opportunity. So Kelly Lang, that's who I was thinking of. Anyways, she had done this, and it worked out very well. So I thought, you know what? I've never been in a helicopter, and yet now I'm going to be flying 5 hours a day, 5 days a week. And I thought, you know, you got to give it a shot. But I didn't hear from them for like 3 weeks. And I thought, they probably realized that they want to go with a veteran broadcaster. And then I got a call, and they said, listen, we finally come to it and to a decision, and we'd like you to be in the helicopter and do the traffic and do the news and do this and that. And I said, great. When they go, when can you start? I said, I'm ready to go anytime you want. So they sent me off to Dallas, Texas, of all places. And I said, why are you sending me to Dallas, Texas? And you're going to spend a couple of weeks in Dallas, Texas. You're going to be shadowing another operation there that does the exact same thing. They've got a helicopter. They go up twice a day. And so I basically spent 3 weeks flying over Dallas, learning how to do traffic in Los Angeles. So then I come back to Los Angeles, September 16th on 1985. I went on the air and started my career. And it was Ken Minyard who named me Captain Jorge. They said, hey, wait a minute. We can't just say, here's our traffic guy. No, you are Captain Jorge. And they gave me the title of that. So it was Captain Jorge in Jetcopter 790. And, you know, it was a great experience because I enjoyed it so much. And in terms of, I spent 25 years in that helicopter. So I spent 25 years honing my broadcasting skills on the job, not only doing the traffic every day, but this is when we began covering high-speed pursuits. We began covering because I happened to be up there and there was an earthquake. It gave me a bird's eye view, a front row seat to what was happening, what was seeing, and I could cover from one area to another. So it gave me increased airtime and visibility. I began covering fires, the Malibu fires, the Topanga Canyon fires, the fires in Bel Air. I became very adept to that. And at times I would be gone for 7, 8, 9 hours covering the fires. I'd come home and my kids would ask my mom, hey, why did Dad go camping without us? And he go, what do you mean he went camping without you? He says, you can smell he's been around a campfire. I go, no, that's from being up in the helicopter over these fires. I mean, we would fly literally all day long and into the night sometimes, weather permitting or whatever. So I really honed my teeth, you might say, my chops in broadcasting from that helicopter. And as a result, I was there for the riots after the Reginald Denny case. The verdict came out on the Rodney King beating, and other things like that really established me as a broadcaster. I was recognized with some awards for that work. I won a Golden Mike at that time, and I was recognized for some outstanding work by the Associated Press. So I knew that I was moving in the right direction, and that others were recognizing that, yes, I was a legitimate broadcaster. I was not your typical broadcast student going through college and working in small markets and working your way up. My opportunity came in one of the largest markets in the country, Los Angeles, as far as radios, because when you look at all the cars, that represents a radio at that time as well, and thousands of people being stuck in traffic. So my broadcasting career started there on radio, and then, and I'll try to condense this, I would work getting up at 3:45 in the morning. I would be at the airport at Van Nuys by 4:30, 4:45. I'd get airborne at 5 a.m. and fly until 9. Then I'd land. Then I'd be off until 3 in the afternoon. So I had 6 hours during the day. And my dad would say, "You got all this time. You should be doing something with that time." As if I don't work enough already, Dad. But you see, my dad instilled that, because my dad would do the same thing. He would do a morning drive show on K-Love called Curiosidades. It was a highly rated morning show. Then he would do the news up until 2 in the afternoon. He'd come home, take a little nap, a shower again, shave, eat, and head to the ballpark. And remember, back in those days, Dodger games didn't start until 8 o'clock at night. He'd get home at midnight and then do it all over again at 5 a.m. So to my dad, this was normal. This is how you succeeded. And he kind of instilled in me the same work ethic. So I started working in, I said, well, I have an opportunity here, because now I'm known as Captain Jorge. A lot of our advertisers, a lot of the people who advertise on the radio show may be also looking for help in their Spanish language advertising. So I started up an advertising agency with a couple of other partners also from radio. And we started an agency, and we had great success. We launched the Galaxy when they first came. We launched Verizon Wireless. We were the Spanish language advertising agency for Verizon Wireless for several years. The Los Angeles Zoo. So we had a variety of clients. So in the middle of the day, I'd have another hat on as a marketing and advertising official. And then in the afternoons, I'd go back and do my job at KABC until 2011, when KABC was sold to Cumulus, and they called me one day and said, "We'd like to see you." And I said, "This is like on a Wednesday." I said, "I never get called to come down to the station." So I thought, I wonder what's going on. I went in, and they said, "Hey, finally, we get to meet you, Captain Jorge." This is the new program director and the vice president. And I should have known something was up when I walked in, and the head of HR was sitting in there too. And I go, "I think I'm about to get fired. This is what I'm thinking."
No.
And they say, we've admired your work. You've done a great job for the station for all these years. And now that we've taken over, we have a whole new direction for the station. And I thought, they're going to tell me about the new plans and everything and what they're going to do. And they said, "And unfortunately, though, that doesn't include you." And they said it with such a smiling, nice face. But It's been great meeting you, but it doesn't include you. So want to let you know that this morning, that was your last broadcast. And I said, I've been here 28 years. You're not going to let me at least have one more broadcast? I want to thank people and say, hey, all the people that I got to work with. And they go, no, we're sorry, but we can't allow that. And I walked out of there, and I just smiled, and I thought, okay, my mom and my dad, I said, wait, I'm going to let them, they're going to worry more than I am, because my wife has always instilled in me that when one door closes, another one opens. God will always provide. If you put your faith in the Lord, he will show you the way. So we're very spiritual that way. And I said, I'm not going to worry about this. And at that time, I had already started working with the Los Angeles Dodgers because their broadcast manager of sales, she'd gone on maternity leave and then decided not to come back. So I had filled in. And at that point I said, well, I'm just going to work full time and focus on the Dodgers. So from 2004 until 2015, my job was behind the scenes of the radio broadcast. I sold my dad's broadcast because who knew it better than another Jarrín? I knew, I could sell that and expand the radio network because at that time, we're not a radio station. It's a broadcast. We don't have ratings to show why you should advertise on the Dodger broadcast because we're not a radio station where they measure the day parts of the station. We're just a broadcast that at times comes on from 7 to 10, and then on Saturday it's on from 1 to 5. On a Sunday, it's an early game. If they're on the East Coast, it could be a 9 o'clock game. So our broadcast moves from day part to day part. You can't get an accurate trend of ratings numbers. The station can see how they're performing, but not the broadcast itself at that time. I knew the key to success for that was to build the footprint. So my job was, at that time, my focus was to build the Dodger broadcast to the point that we were up to 15 stations from Sacramento all the way down to the Mexican border, as far east as Montgomery, Alabama. I once had a station that called me in Montgomery, Alabama, wanting to know if they could carry the Dodger broadcast in Spanish. And I thought, of all places, Montgomery, Alabama. And he says, well, it's interesting because of the hurricanes, Katrina specifically, and others, with the devastation, a lot of these hurricanes, who came to do all the work, the construction work? Latinos. Latinos go wherever there is work to be found. And at that time in Alabama, there was a significant number of Latinos who had been working in Montgomery. And they had a survey because in Alabama, they're not in any particular team's market. So they had the freedom. Can we follow the Atlanta Braves? Or that's the closest team. Or who do we want to follow? And they did a survey amongst the Latinos there. And it came down to the Yankees and the Dodgers. And when they said, Yankees or Dodgers, which do you want? It ended up being Dodgers the full way. So I had an affiliate in Montgomery, Alabama, as well as all through California and parts of Arizona and the Mexican border. And we amplified that. And then my bosses at Dodger Stadium came to me back in 2015, said, look, Fox wants to do a limited number of games in Spanish on television. Now, for us, it's an experiment. Let's see how this works. Would you be interested in doing this? Because they didn't want to commit themselves to already a full-time broadcaster, because this was just going to be 30 games. I said, they think, hey, you've got experience in broadcasting. You're not afraid. You speak well. Would you be interested in doing this? And you would be paired up with Manny Mota. I said, yes, absolutely. Because my philosophy has always been, you prepare yourself for an opportunity. And when luck knocks on there, you make your luck by being prepared. I had been prepared to a certain degree, but this was something new. This was going to be a stretch. Can I do this? I knew what it took. I'd listened to my father all this time. I knew the phraseology. I knew the cadence. I knew the rhythm. And I knew Manny Mota really well. So that chemistry is important to have with your partner. We did 30 games. Next thing we know, it became 50 games the following year. Then they said, we want to do 100 games. And at that point, when Fox and the Dodgers had reached that point of 100 games, this is now a full-time gig. But then the Dodgers decided, that's when Guggenheim came in and they established Spectrum. They wanted to do all Dodger games on television in Spanish. So their idea was, let's do this. Let's take Fernando Valenzuela and Pepe Iniguez, who had been partners with my dad, the three of them in the broadcast booth. Let's move them over to the television side, because with their name recognition, that could help launch the TV side. And let's put Jorge in the broadcast booth with his father. And we create a very interesting story, a secondary story. First time, father and son working together on a major league broadcast. Never been done before. So we were the first, and that was in 2015. I joined my dad, so that at this point, what I do is I do the pregame show. It's a 40-minute pregame show with Jesus Quinones. Jesus Quinones is a bilingual former reporter, television reporter who has experience from Arizona. He was working for the Dodgers in the PR department as a public relations official. And we approached Jesus. Jesus, would you like to work with Jorge doing pregame show? Absolutely. So we do the pregame show, take it all the way up to first pitch. I introduce my dad. I hand it off to him. My dad works alone, like the old days with Vince Scully. That hasn't changed. So we allow him to work alone. He is both play-by-play and analyst. He does his own thing from the first pitch until the end of the third inning. Then I come in, and in the beginning it was just me. But I thought, there's a value to having someone also to work off of, to ask questions, for analyzing it. And I said, can we have Jesus also during the inning? So now, you see in all broadcasts, you always see 2 or maybe up to 3 people. So what we try to do is do a marriage of that style along with my dad, because so many people grew up listening just to my dad. We don't want to interfere with that. We want that, preserve that the way it's always been. And of course, as a Hall of Fame broadcaster, he has pulled this off to great degree, great excellence. So I work with Jesus. We together work the 4th, 5th, and 6th innings. Then my dad comes back in the 7th, and he takes it all the way to the end. Now, if we go into extra innings, then my dad and I just trade off. I'll do the 10th, he'll do the 11th, I'll do the 12th, and if need be 13th, whatever. And believe me, we've had games where World Series, we went 18 innings in one game with Max Muncy walk-off home run. That was in 2018. So, that's the way we do it. And that's how my career began and has been with the Dodgers ever since.
Wow. It's been a long journey from you, Jorge. I mean,
it has.
There is a couple of downhill slopes, but then, really nice rebounds, definitely, and getting some really nice jobs. And now being here, you're being the Spanish voice of the Dodgers now. But I have to say, what was that like? 2015. Your dad is now, okay, mijo, aquí está el micrófono. Here's the mic. It's your innings now. Mm-hmm. What was going through your mind?
That, to be honest with you, was one of the most nerve-wracking times. I thought that no problem, I can handle this. I can, even if because it's normal to always have butterflies and be nervous, okay? But I had already been working with Manny Mota for a couple of seasons, so I felt that I was ready for all of this. And my dad would give me suggestions. He would help me, letting me know how I can improve and everything. But when the time came, I thought, this is it. And then all of a sudden it hit me. I said, I know my dad has got my back, but at the same time, in my mind, I'm thinking, how am I going to live up to that standard? There's going to be the comparisons. There's going to be people who say, hey, it's nice, but he's no Jaime Jarrín, because frankly, there is no other Jaime Jarrín. His command of the language, his eloquence, I mean, at times, even ways that he explains something, I think to myself, oh my gosh, I mean, I don't even use those words. So I want to keep it simple. How do I not become, or how do I stay away from wanting to imitate him? How do I make myself different? So these are all the things that I'm thinking about. And then the moment comes and I go on the air. And honestly, the night of, I literally was up half the night. I was sick to my stomach. I got nauseous from nerves and everything, but it was very difficult for me in the beginning because I felt that I put too much attention on that aspect. What are people going to think? What are they going to say? How can I not embarrass my father? How can I live up to his expectations? Even though I know he's my dad and he's going to support me. He's going to back, he's going to have my back. But for the first week or two, I remember when he would give it to me, my dad would then just sit there with his headphones on, listening to me. And I'm thinking, my dad's listening to me. He'll give me some good advice, but he's a Hall of Fame broadcaster, man. And this is my first real gig on the radio side. And it wasn't until we got to a point, maybe a week later of doing this, where he didn't say anything, but the moment he handed it to me, he listened for the first minute or two, and he took his headphones off and he got up and he went to take a break. That told me he's comfortable. He's comfortable with me. But still, I was putting a lot of pressure on myself. I didn't want to read social media. I didn't want to look at Twitter. I didn't want to, for fear that I was going to see a comment that would devastate me and affect me. And I needed to keep the negative thoughts out of my head. And I have to tell you, it was my son, Stefan, who gave me the best advice that turned things around for me. Because my wife knew and my sons were saying, Dad, you're being too hard on yourself. You're being too critical. You're fine. You're fine. But you're being just too critical. You got to relax. And when my son was drafted by the Dodgers in 2011, he was so excited. He was so over the moon. He was going to finally realize his dreams of being a professional baseball player. He was good enough to be drafted, but I remember Logan White and Ned Colletti saying, hey, we've watched your son. He came to a showcase. We're going to draft him. But I'll tell you what, he's going to have to work his butt off to stay there. He really does, because it's going to be tough. And he did. And then my son got hurt in a game, had a concussion. He was out for 3 weeks. When he came back from that, he had a hard time finding his rhythm, getting his rhythm offensively going and everything. And he started really pushing and pressing. And you know what happens to a ball player when they're pushing and they're pressing and they're not able to relax and focus? He just started going downhill. His offensive numbers dropped. And then he started worrying about, am I going to get cut? Am I going to get let go? And finally, I don't know where it came from, but he said to himself, Dad, I just decided, did this team draft me because I'm good enough to be here? Or did they draft me as a favor to JAIME JARRIN, the Hall of Fame broadcaster? And he said, I'm going to stop thinking about that. I don't know how long I'm going to be here, but I'm going to make the best of every single day. I'm just going to focus on pleasing myself and no one else. And if I can finish the day knowing that I gave it my best shot and whatever may come, and all of a sudden things started changing for him. And he took a more relaxed approach. He had a 3-week period where he had 6 home runs, a double, 2 triples. I mean, he had a great time. And at that time, the Dodgers had traded with the Philadelphia Phillies for Sean Victorino. Dodgers sent 2 major league players to Philadelphia for Victorino with a player to be named later. It happened to be at that time that the Phillies were scouting the Dodger minor leagues, and they saw Stefan in that period of time, and he was on an offensive tear. His numbers were good, and they selected him. And he got traded to the Phillies, and he was with the Phillies for another year, but before his career eventually came to an end. But again, it was the advice of saying, hey, at the end of the day, Dad, the only person you got to please is yourself. And if you can go home knowing that you've done the best that you can, everything else will fall into place. And things clicked after that with that. I became more relaxed and more confident in my own style. I love listening to my dad. I try not to sound like him because people say, you sound exactly like your dad. We can have a hard time distinguishing the tone and we have to listen for a moment. Is that Jaime or is that Jorge? And then they quickly come to the realization. No. That's not Jaime. That's Jorge. But some of the broadcasters that I listen to, that I enjoy listening to, who style I try to emulate in a way, you might say, that I take from John Miller of the San Francisco Giants. Yes, I know it's the Giants, But John Miller is, I love his very personable, warm, like he's leaning in and talking to you specifically. I like that approach. My father has a similar approach, but of course, because he has 62 years of experience, he's got a wealth of personal stories to draw off of, to fill between pitches, foul tips, as you start to learn the mechanics of the game. You want to do if you have to do a sponsor read that's, 10 lines long, you don't want to do that in between pitches if you can help it. You want to wait until there's a foul tip, fouled off into the stands. You have a little bit more time to get that read in comfortably and then go back to the action. Same thing. Don't start to tell a story when there's 2 outs. You don't want to do that because the next out is going to come. You got to get out, go to commercial break. You may not have a chance to tell the full length of the story. So you start learning the mechanics and everything, and then just repetition makes you more and more comfortable. Basically, I hope I've answered your question.
Well, you definitely have, Jorge, and you and your dad have definitely made a very great double play duo. Now, you guys can make the argument who's second, who's short. You guys can make that argument between the two of you. But you know what? That's all the time we have left, Jorge. Just thank you so much for coming onto the podcast and being the 1-year anniversary special guest. And it's been an absolute pleasure. And you know what? I'm going to say the fans are definitely going to appreciate you coming onto the podcast.
It's been a real pleasure. Alex, you're doing a great job. I wish you great success. Continue your podcast. But I got a feeling, Alex, I'm going to see you in some other capacity not long from now, whether it's a sideline reporter or up in the booth. You keep doing what you're doing because you're on the right path. And you work, the work that you're doing serves as a good example to others who are just like you, who also want to be in the world of sports, whether it's in broadcasting or in a front office or have something to do with their favorite team. Congratulations to you, and I wish you the best of luck.
Great. Thank you so much for those encouraging words, Jorge. And you know what? I wish you the best of luck with this season. I mean, I know the Dodgers are making a World Series run, and making a pretty good argument there that they could be the World Series champions this year, especially with that acquisition of Mookie Betts. But you know what? I wish you the best of luck on all the games this season and with all of your future endeavors.
Hey, listen, when we win that World Series, one of the things I want to do is come back on your podcast and tell you all about it.
Hey, you know what? I'm definitely going to keep that in mind. And you know what? The Dodger fans, the fan base, have been waiting for one for quite some time. So
yes, you have.
I'm definitely going to remember that one and keep that in the back of my head.
Great. Thanks, Alex.
Thank you so much, Jorge. And of course, if you're not on the sideline, it's not Sideline Sports Podcast, the source of all SoCal sports. Have a good one, everybody, and make sure to stay safe.